Governors, were you surprised by Governor Christie's remarks recently at a town hall meeting in New Jersey in which he took a number of former governors to task, including both of you, for payments into the pension system over the years? Governor Whitman, he stated in reports that I've read that you struck a deal with the teachers union in order to skip payments for 2 years. Was that accurate?
No, it wasn't. And in fact, he said that they have printed a retraction on their whatever site he has, because that never happened. The teachers union, the unions who reduced payment from 5% to 3% for 2 years because until we had paid off everything that was needed, we were overfunded. When I left, both pension systems were over 100% funded, each one of them. What's some of the things that happened afterwards, subsequently, when the retirement age was lowered from 60 to 55, and then you had a period of 8 years where you had some 50,000 people added to the state payroll. At no time during those periods were the adjustments, the assumptions on the adjustments ever taken into account. And there was no deal done with them. I mean, they weren't terribly happy with me, the unions, overall. They weren't going to do deals.
Governor Florio, what's your reaction to the governor's comments, and did he inherit a very difficult pension situation today?
Well, I mean, the first observation is that the tradition in the past has been to speak well of your peers, and that it wasn't any inclination to ever be hostile and by name be denouncing people or criticizing people. Obviously, the governor has a different approach to things, but I think this was an example of the governor being misserved or ill-served by his staff people. It's 100% wrong. I mean, I fully funded the pension system with no borrowings of anything. We used general revenues. So I'm not sure what it is that prompted him to do that, other than bad staff work. I'm assuming, because I don't think the governor would purposefully go out and misstate the facts.
The governor, you concede, is faced with a very difficult situation, and he is calling for a new round of pension reforms after what was enacted in 2011. And he has commissioned a bipartisan panel to come up with new recommendations. I'd like to ask you, now that he has asked that panel to stay on and implement some of those proposals, which claim to be able to save the state billions of dollars, what do you think can be accomplished?
Well, the hope is that you get the system back onto a fully funded system as it was when we left office. You know, this is an obligation. This is a debt and an agreement that we have made with the employees of the state. So it is a true debt and needs to be carried on the books that way and reflected that way. There are a lot of things that they need to do, but he's got to first, though, figure out and put behind him the issues that he has with the last reform that they did and the requirement to pay into the system, which the payments haven't been at the level that was required, that he agreed to under his original legislation.
And speaking of others that have to buy in on this latest round, Governor Florio, will the Democrats buy in unless there is at least some payment toward what was owed and deferred because of the budget gap last year would be paid in this year under the obligation?
That appears to be the case at this point, that there's no movement on a new deal until the last one was totally consummated, which is not. But I think it's important to note this is a very complicated issue. And I'm really troubled by some of the things that have happened. But I can't really criticize it because I haven't got an alternative. I mean, I don't feel comfortable being critical. But I think what has to be done if this proposal of the governor's is going forward, there's got to be a full understanding of its ramifications. The worst thing in the world would be to put together a deal that nobody understands, have a ballot question in November that people would pass because they don't fully comprehend the intricacies, then have the whole thing blow up.
Well, you mentioned the ballot question, and that's going to require a constitutional amendment, which the legislature has to act on. Is there enough time left in this fiscal year to get that accomplished and get on the November ballot?
Well, technically, there's the legal time frame. They could still do it. It's a question of whether they will move that fast, because as you point out, they've still got to get the budget done. The budget doesn't happen until June, so there's a lot of work to be done between now and then just to settle the numbers.
Well, a judge has ordered the administration to pay back what was deferred last year because of the budget gap, to pay it back in this year's budget. And the Supreme Court is going to hear the case in May, next month. If the legislature decides that there's money needed for hospitals and for education in the state, what's going to happen to the state budget?
Well, it's going to be up to the court to come up with the sanction. what they did in the school financing cases was to say that the state had to come up with the money, and they actually closed the schools to induce the state to come up with the money. So again, it'll depend upon the, I guess, the backbone of the Supreme Court. If they come down in that direction, they've got to have some sanction, and that'll be difficult to do. And I'm assuming this constitutional amendment will guarantee that ultimately the state will stand behind the pensions. And if the state could stand behind the pensions now, there's no need to do this. So the state's going to have problems. I mean, thorough and efficient is in the Constitution. It's been 30 years of litigation, and we still haven't got a funded formula. So just because it's going into the Constitution doesn't mean you've solved the problem.
Well, trying to solve the problem is very important to New Jersey's fiscal health. Governors, thank you very much for sharing your viewpoints on this important issue.
Thank you.